Hi, my name is Patricia Bay, and I want to present a little workshop to you on supporting at-risk youth or at-risk students. First, I'll explain a little bit the magnitude of the problem and just how many at-risk students there are in America. There are 15 million children in the United States that live in poverty, with the standard definition of poverty, which is 21% of all children in America. If we use a little bit different of a standard, studies show that it takes twice the income of the poverty level, to basically just cover the basic expenses that a family has. And so if we use that standard, 43% of children in America are considered low income. Children of color are disproportionately low income, and youth from low income families are more likely to engage in at-risk behaviors. A third of the youth from low-income families fail to earn a high school diploma, and 1 in 10 youth from low-income families will graduate from a four-year college. 1 in 5 youth from low-income families are charged with an adult crime by the age of 24. Less than half of youth from low-income families remain consistently connected to school and or the job market between the ages of 18 to 24. 1 in 5 youth from low-income families will never connect with the labor market at all. The gap in standardized test scores between affluent and low-income students grew by 40% since the 1960s. I would like to go over a few behavioral characteristics of at-risk youth. I'd like to talk about the 5 C's of competency, which are critical school competencies, the concept of self-esteem and self-efficacy, connectedness, coping ability, and control. Lack of one of these skills is related to at-risk categories in behavior like school dropout, substance abuse, teen pregnancy, youth delinquency, violence, and suicide. Being an at-risk student has a huge impact on academic success. Low-income students are not always, but they are often underperforming when it comes to academics. They are lacking in basic numeracy and literacy skills. This causes the students to leave school earlier than their peers who are not considered at risk. They have a lack of basic academic skills like reading, writing, and arithmetic, and that can be due to developmental delays, learning disabilities, limited English, or an emotional disturbance. Students with low academic skills may be withdrawn and apathetic, or they may be overly disruptive or aggressive. The most important thing to remember when it comes to the academic success of at-risk students is that early detection is critical. The sooner we can identify that they have an issue, and the earlier we can start fixing that issue, the more likely they are to be successful in the future. Being an at-risk student also has an impact on personal and social success. At-risk students often lack basic social behavioral skills necessary for success. They have a harder time attending to tasks, raising their hands, and following directions, all skills that facilitate learning and have an impact beyond the school years. They have a harder time developing work habits, coping skills, and peer relationships. They have a poor self-concept and low academic self-efficacy, which are critical determinations of school dropout. At-risk students are exposed to more stress and do not typically have the appropriate coping strategies or abilities. They may compulsively act out or withdraw, use denial, have anxiety or depression. I'd like to talk a little bit about anxiety and depression because they are so common with at-risk students. Anxiety will interfere with the learning process, social judgment, and interpersonal relationships. It can also lead to aggressive and destructive reactions. And then depression can lead to suicide ideation, or self-defeating behaviors. Both are associated with cognitive distortions, negative self-talk, and anticipation of more future negative outcomes. Anxiety and depression place students at risk for learning problems, academic underachievement, conduct problems, and poor social problem solving. At-risk students also show deficits in decision-making skills. They lack information or knowledge about good solutions. They are less likely to consider consequences fully. They feel powerless at shaping their own lives, and they feel like there are sources and powers at work outside of themselves that are shaping their lives, so they just feel like there's nothing they can do to fix their lives. They have the inability or unwillingness to delay gratification. They lack a viable life purpose and feel like they have little to lose, so they have an easier time saying yes to at-risk behaviors. We'll talk for a minute about something called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, which have recently been identified in a medical study. There are 10 categories of ACEs, and it's a really simple questionnaire asking if students have experienced any of 10 things, which range from domestic violence to sexual abuse to divorce, students take the questionnaire, and if they have experienced one of those things, it's a point, and it ranges from 1 to 10, and the number that they score on this questionnaire, the higher that it is, the more likely they are to have some of these at-risk behaviors or some of these negative outcomes. And the higher ACE scores are linked to risky health behaviors, chronic health conditions like obesity or heart disease. It puts them at a greater risk for lower life potential or early death. Now we're going to talk about some interventions and some strategies that we as counselors can employ to help at-risk students. We can facilitate opportunities for a student to experience academic success. A lot of these students have just failed over and over and over again, and they expect themselves to fail. So if we can facilitate an opportunity for them to experience success, they can get a taste of that success and want to do more and more and more to be successful. Another huge thing we can do is connect students with a mentor. This can look like bringing in community partnerships or just finding someone that you know, your grandfather or a doctor or someone who has extra time, someone who's retired, bring them in and connect them with a student. Obviously you have to go through the proper channels of background checks and all of those things, but if we can connect students with a mentor, they can have someone in their life who believes in them and consistently shows up for them. Students with a mentor are 52% less likely to skip school, and they are 55% more likely to be enrolled in college. We can encourage involvement in an outside organization like the Boys and Girls Clubs is a great alternative for students. 1 in 5 students leave school every day with no place to go, so they're going home to an empty house. Maybe they're choosing to not go home at all because they know that there's no one there to hold them accountable. So juvenile crime escalates between 3 and 7 p.m. on school days, and 43 million students lack access to a summer learning program. So 43 million students go all summer without being involved in a program where they are learning or being given access to sports or the arts, stuff like that. The next 3 things were identified from a study with at-risk students who are resilient. So these were at-risk students who showed success academically or personally or socially, and they identified 3 categories where counselors can come in and help at-risk students be successful. The first one is to build meaningful relationships. Show students that you care. It's really simple. Get to know them, get to know what they like to do, what their hopes and their dreams are, and begin to help them develop strategies to do that. We can challenge our own personal biases about poor students. It's really easy to think that you don't have a bias, but sometimes as counselors, we see these negative statistics over and over again, and sometimes those can take hold in our subconscious, and even though we don't think that we are maybe lowering expectations for at-risk students, sometimes we are. So if we hold ourselves accountable to our own personal biases, we can set the standards higher for these students. And the last one for this is just be respectful and be warm and approachable. Students want to be treated with respect, just like any other human. The next area is to build on the cultural wealth of the students. This looks like helping students identify their hopes and their dreams. Then we can nurture these hopes and their dreams while acknowledging that there are some real obstacles and barriers to success. Then we can leverage the networks of people, contacts, and community resources that enable the achievement of these goals. The students from the survey said that they had a lot of people in their lives that the school didn't necessarily know about because it wasn't a direct parent or a guardian. So a lot of times this was a mentor or their neighbor or someone from their church who was a positive role model, but just wasn't their parent. So the school didn't necessarily know about this person, and they weren't able to communicate and really all be on the same team. So if we can talk with students and find out who those people are in their lives and all get on the same team, that's going to really help the student be successful. And lastly, we can provide mental health services in schools. This looks like counselors and school psychologists, and maybe even bringing in therapists to a school environment to help students with some more long-term therapy. We can resolve personal concerns that hinder academic success. A lot of these at-risk students have stuff going on at home that they're very stressed out about, and they bring that stress into the school environment. So if we can identify those stressors and help them develop coping strategies, they're going to be more successful in school. Counselors can focus more on the personal and social success. These students stated that they wanted help. They want personal and social skills. We can refer students and families to needed resources. Communities have a lot of resources for students that extend outside of school. So when we identify a student that might need some long-term therapy or some social services, we can connect with those community partners and make sure that the family knows that they have this referral and they have these resources at their disposal. And then lastly, we can teach life skills. These students aren't necessarily learning this at home, so we can teach stress management, help seeking, cognitive skills, and emotional coping skills. These are all things that students are going to need to be successful later on in life, and if we can teach them sooner than later, the better chance they have at being successful. So I just wanted to thank you for listening, and I hope that you learned just a little something that you can take back to your school or to your district and hopefully put in place. Thank you so much.